I stepped into the office that morning with the same quiet confidence I'd carried for years. Hair pinned neatly, blazer pressed, documents organized. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening. Yet the moment the door clicked shut behind me, I heard it. Whispered laughter slicing through the air like a thin, deliberate blade. Auntie shouldn't even be here. Too old for this job. The boy didn't even lower his voice. He wanted me to hear it. And when I turned, every eye swung toward me, smirking, amused, triumphant. That kind of laughter doesn't erupt spontaneously. It blooms from cruelty, carefully nurtured. The office manager leaned back in his chair and chuckled, loud enough for the whole floor. Someone lifted their phone, not even pretending to hide it, recording like my humiliation was part of their morning entertainment. My fingers curled around the warm coffee cup, but the heat did nothing to stop the tremor running through. I tried to speak, a simple, "Excuse me?" but my voice cracked, and before the words could form, their laughter drowned me out. It washed over me like a dirty tide. Then a notification pinged on someone's phone. A friend of theirs snickered and held it up. A group chat, my picture, my face zoomed in, captioned, "Past her prime," hearts and laughing emojis underneath. I felt desks shift, papers conveniently shoved aside so I wouldn't sit near them, chairs angled away as though proximity to me was contamination. They didn't even try to hide it. Then my boss strolled in, adjusting his cufflinks. "Morning! Did HR send you the retirement planning packet yet?" he joked, right in front of our clients. They laughed with him. It burned. Oh, it burned. I excused myself before my voice betrayed me again. My face felt on fire as I pushed through the glass doors, pretending I didn't hear them chuckling behind me. The elevator doors closed, and the metallic ding at each floor felt like a judgment, echoing insults I'd swallowed for years. When I reached the lobby, I caught my reflection in the building's tinted glass. Older skin, tired eyes, a woman who had learned to survive 100 silent cuts. Yet beneath it, a stiffness in my jaw, a resolve that refused to break. I walked to the parking lot, keeping my gaze down, until one of my coworkers called out behind me, "Drive safe, Auntie. Don't fall asleep at the wheel." More laughter. That one pierced deeper than the rest. My heart hammered inside my chest, a tight, breathless rhythm. Images flashed through my mind. Every condescending comment, every stolen idea, every time I smiled through disrespect because fighting back cost more energy than staying silent. I reached my car and sank into the driver's seat. My fingers wrapped around the steering wheel, knuckles whitening. I didn't cry, I didn't break, I just simmered. Because something inside me was shifting, quietly, dangerously. A spark, a beginning, the very first breath of revenge. I wasn't always the woman they mocked. There was a time, years ago, when I walked into my first job with fire in my eyes, young, ambitious, ready to prove myself. But even then, I learned quickly how the world measured me. Promotions passed me by with polite smiles and vague excuses. "Maybe next cycle," they'd say, but their eyes always flicked toward younger faces, fresher skin. In those early days, when the disappointment sat heavy on my chest, my late husband would take my hands and whisper, "Never let anyone define your worth by numbers." His voice still lingers in the back of my mind, soft yet unshakable. I carried that line like armor. But armor isn't always enough. I raised my children, held the house together, and still excelled at work, quietly, efficiently, without applause. My accomplishments were often invisible, overshadowed by louder voices. I remember sitting in team meetings, hearing colleagues present my ideas as if they had birthed them themselves. I'd smile, shallow and practiced, swallowing frustration because I couldn't afford conflict. And then there was the first real cut. The moment ageism stopped being subtle. A mentor, someone I trusted, glanced at my report and said, "You think too traditionally. Younger people understand the direction better." I laughed it off in front of him, but the words burrowed beneath my ribs like thorns. Busset. I built my worth in secret after that. Night after night, while the world slept, I sat hunched over my laptop, chasing certifications, fine-tuning presentations, studying markets. No one saw the hours. No one saw the sacrifice. They only saw the steady competence and underestimated it. The betrayal that hurt the most came from a close friend, someone I confided in. She went to the board and mocked my old-fashioned methods, twisting my loyalty into ammunition. I found out from a whisper in the hallway. That was the day something inside me hardened permanently. Even family gatherings weren't safe. Relatives sipped tea and chuckled. "Why are you still working? Isn't it time to slow down?" Their words blended with the office mockery until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Everywhere I went, someone was ready to shrink me. So I stopped defending myself. Instead, I watched. I listened. I mapped the office, the personalities, the patterns. I saw how insecurity made people petty, how fear made them cruel. And I took notes, quiet, private, meticulous notes on every injustice. Nights alone, with the bills spread across my dining table, I imagined what power would feel like if I weren't underestimated. Not revenge, not yet, just freedom. The freedom to answer to no one. Knocked? I pulled out old journals, letters, performance reviews, all the evidence of my consistency, my resilience. Page after page reminded me that I had been strong for far too long to allow a handful of insecure children to break me. And finally, the truth settled into me like a steady heartbeat. The mockery was never truly about my age. It was about fear. Fear of a woman who kept rising no matter how many times they tried to bury her. That night, sitting under the harsh glow of my desk lamp, I made a decision. I was done surviving. This time, they would see me win. I went back to the office with a different fire in my chest. If they wanted to reduce me to a joke, I'd rise in silence, sharpening myself on every insult they threw my way. I started with the numbers, quietly, carefully. Every document I touched, every spreadsheet I audited, every report I reviewed, I looked deeper. And beneath the polished presentations and fake smiles, I found what no one else bothered to see. Mismanagement woven like rot through the company's foundation, financial loopholes, unreported expenses, numbers that didn't add up. While I gathered evidence, the sabotage around me grew bolder. Emails I sent were lost, meeting invites conveniently forgotten, tasks reassigned behind my back to set me up for failure. Younger colleagues exchanged knowing glances, whispering, "Just retire already." They wanted me to trip, to crumble. So I did the opposite. I volunteered for every difficult project they threw at me, the ones designed to break me, and every time they waited for me to fail, I delivered flawless results. Watching their forced smiles as I handed in perfect work was the smallest taste of satisfaction. Yet the pattern continued. Ideas stolen straight from my drafts, presented by younger voices who didn't even understand them fully. Each theft stung, not just because it was unfair, but because the room applauded them while I sat invisible. The humiliation curled inward, turning into a cold, steady resolve. The breaking point came during a major client meeting. I'd prepared the strategy, the projections, the entire framework. But when I tried to speak, the project lead cut me off with a dismissive, "Let's hear from someone newer." The clients looked confused, skeptical even, as the younger colleagues stumbled through my work. Their eyes kept drifting to me, silently asking questions they didn't voice. That moment told me everything. My competence wasn't the issue. Their insecurity was. I began observing more closely who talked the most but did the least, who clung to influence through fear, who built alliances on gossip. The power map of the office became a blueprint in my mind, each connection revealing its own weakness. Nights stretched into early mornings as I sat alone in the office, poring over financial statements. The deeper I dug, the clearer the cracks in leadership became, decisions made out of ego, funds misallocated, a structure begging to collapse. That was when I reached out to the only person I trusted, a financial advisor who knew how to trace power back to its roots. We met in quiet cafes and dim corners, discussing possibilities that would make most people tremble. Acquisition wasn't a fantasy, it was a path, if I had the courage to walk it. Back at work, I overheard the children laughing again. She'll retire any day now. Look at her, hanging by a thread. Their voices floated through the corridor, sharp and mocking. I didn't turn around. I didn't respond. I just recorded the moment in my mind, storing it like every other insult, fuel for later. Anger pulsed through me, but I didn't let it spill. I shaped it instead, turned it into strategy. Every slight became data. Every insult became leverage. And then I started my own quiet campaign. In meetings, I asked pointed questions, subtle, innocent sounding, that exposed others' incompetence without ever lifting a finger. A misplaced decimal, a flawed assumption, a missed deadline. I let them reveal themselves. Outside the office, my friends noticed I'd grown distant, absorbed. I brushed it off with gentle smiles, but inside, I was constructing a storm. Each day, as I endured new humiliations, I visualized the future. The exact moment the entire power structure would flip. Their laughter would die in their throats. Their arrogance would crumble. I refined my plan relentlessly, checking every detail twice, then again. No risks, no mistakes, no room for anyone to underestimate me ever again. I wasn't just preparing for a comeback. I was preparing for a takeover. The turning point didn't arrive with thunder. It came quietly, through a single phone call that lit my entire world on fire. I was sitting at my kitchen table, stacks of documents spread around me, when my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in years. A former mentor, one of the few who had ever believed in me. His voice was low, urgent. "Listen carefully," he whispered. "A major shareholder is vulnerable. They're considering selling. If someone moves quickly, they could take control." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then he added, "Your company's stock is underpriced, severely. Internal mismanagement is dragging it down. If you act now, you could turn everything around." It wasn't just a warning, it was a revelation, a doorway carved open by fate. I set the phone down, my pulse thundering in my ears. For the first time, all the pieces of my quiet, relentless work aligned into one clear possibility. I had the means, the savings, the assets, the quiet investments my late husband and I built together. I could buy a controlling stake overnight. The thought sent adrenaline surging through my body, sharp, electric. I imagined it so vividly, walking into that office not as the woman they mocked, but as the one signing their paychecks. The shift would be seismic. I didn't waste a second. I called legal advisors, financial analysts, consultants, every conversation cloaked in secrecy. No one knew my name would be behind the acquisition. They were pieces in a silent formation, each step orchestrated with precision. And then, during this careful digging, another advantage surfaced. One of my loudest rivals was knee-deep in personal debt. Desperate, vulnerable, the kind of weakness that could collapse an entire facade. Leverage I could use if needed, if they dared to resist. At home, I stood in front of the mirror, rehearsing the confrontation I'd been denied all my life. Their smug expressions, their laughter, their dismissive glances. I imagined each reaction cracking, shattering, turning into pure, wide-eyed shock. Later that night, I drove past the office. The parking lot was empty, the building dark except for the faint security lights. I sat in my car, staring at the windows where they once snickered at me. I memorized the corners, the hallways, the conference room where they stole my ideas. I absorbed everything, because soon I'd walk back in with a different kind of power. As I drove home, I replayed every insult, every whispered joke, every humiliating moment. Not with pain this time, but with calculation. Each one had a place in the final showdown I was crafting. Somewhere between exhaustion and victory, the realization settled into me like steel. They no longer controlled the narrative. The humiliation that once suffocated me now fueled something unstoppable. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to sleep, but only briefly. My dreams were sharp, restless, haunted by everything they had done to me, and illuminated by what tomorrow promised. Because tomorrow wasn't another workday. Tomorrow was the beginning of the end, on my terms. I walked into the office before sunrise, the building still half asleep, but I wasn't. My steps felt different, firmer, quieter, charged with a power I hadn't shown before. The security guard glanced at me with a puzzled frown. Even he sensed something had shifted. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. By the time I reached my desk, the first internal email alert pinged. Then another. And another. Subject lines blazing across screens. Aunty acquires majority stake in the company. Gasps rippled through the hall like a sudden windstorm. Chairs scraped, whispers tangled. The same faces that once smirked at me now stared with widening eyes, mouths parting as if the air had turned thin. I stood, straightened my blazer, and spoke just loud enough. Boardroom, 10 minutes. No panic in my voice, no tremor, just clarity sharpened by months of humiliation. When I entered the boardroom, every seat was filled. Colleagues stiff, confused, pretending to understand what was happening. I placed a thick folder on the table, opened it slowly, and slid the first document forward. This, I began, is your internal mismanagement. Pages of errors, hidden adjustments, and manipulated statements lit up on the screen behind me. Their eyes darted, searching for escape routes in the numbers, but there were none. A hush fell as I clicked to the next slide. Screenshots, recordings, whispered conversations, petty insults passed behind my back. The very moments they thought would break me now reflected back at them with surgical precision. Someone stuttered, Why do you have all this?" I met his gaze. "Because you taught me to pay attention." While they shifted, sweating, legal notices were already landing in their inboxes. Clean, final, uncontestable. Every pathway to block my authority had been sealed before dawn. The same people who once mocked me now leaned forward, softening their voices. "We didn't know. Maybe we misread. Please, can we talk about this?" But I wasn't here to soothe anyone's guilt. I turned to the structural chart projected on the wall and began reassigning roles. Calm, efficient, unapologetic. The names of former tormentors slid downward. Their departments shifted under new oversight, under me. Rival colleagues tried to object, raising hands like drowning swimmers. I shot each down with precise citations from their own contracts and financial inconsistencies they hoped no one would ever notice. And then the office manager, the one who led the chorus of humiliation, finally snapped. "You can't just walk in and—" I placed a single sheet of evidence in front of them. Their voice cracked mid-sentence. Their face drained of color. All that arrogance, all that practiced superiority dissolved into a silent, trembling collapse. I stepped back and addressed the room. Age is not weakness. Experience is not irrelevance. And underestimating someone because you think they're harmless? I let the silence stretch. That's the most expensive mistake you can make. Smirks disappeared, eyes lowered. The entire room shifted, recognizing a power they had never imagined sitting quietly among them. I collected my folder, closed it gently, and nodded toward the door. By the time I walked out of the boardroom, the corridor felt lighter, almost echoing with the sound of justice settling into place. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight lift, replaced by something electric, something victorious, something entirely mine. The office was different now. The whispers had stopped, or at least they had softened into cautious acknowledgement. People moved carefully, measured their words, watched their tone. The air no longer vibrated with condescension. It hummed instead with a reluctant respect. I found moments to sit quietly in my office, alone, reflecting on the journey. From the sting of public humiliation to the intoxicating taste of control, every step had been carved with patience, precision, and silent rage. And now, in the calm after the storm, I savored that satisfaction quietly, letting it settle like a warm weight in my chest. Those who had tormented me for years were humbled. Some chose to leave voluntarily, retreating before they could face further exposure. Others stayed, cautiously adapting to my authority, learning quickly that the rules had changed and I was the arbiter. Under my leadership, the company began to thrive. Projects that had languished under mismanagement now soared. Performance metrics improved, client satisfaction rose, and my contributions were undeniable. Every number, every report was a quiet confirmation that I had been right all along. I turned attention to mentoring younger employees, not to assert dominance, but to instill respect, resilience, and competence. It's not about age, I'd tell them. It's about dedication, strategy, and knowing your worth. They listened, they learned, and the lesson carried far beyond the office walls. The personal healing that followed was subtle but profound. The shame I had carried for years transformed into a badge of power. Each past insult became a stepping stone, every cruel joke a lesson in patience and observation. I no longer carried bitterness, only clarity and quiet strength. I allowed myself small celebrations, a peaceful dinner with family, soft smiles over shared jokes, the comfort of knowing my worth was finally acknowledged without question. Each moment reaffirmed my inner strength, the resilience that had carried me through countless trials. Colleagues who had once doubted me now sought guidance, their previous arrogance replaced with hesitant respect. Even the ones who had laughed at my expense approached me carefully, recognizing that the tables had turned entirely. Legal and financial systems reinforced my position. Every contract, every clause, every regulatory safeguard was in place. No vulnerability remained, no loophole left for anyone to challenge my authority. And in quiet, private moments, I allowed myself a subtle indulgence, the irony of it all. Those who had mocked my age, belittled my efforts, laughed at my persistence. They had inadvertently prepared me for this victory. Their underestimation had been my greatest advantage. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence of the office surround me. Every insult, every whisper, every smirk now existed as a memory fueling my triumph. The journey from humiliation to absolute control had been long, painstaking, and at times excruciating, but it had been mine, and in that truth I found unshakable satisfaction.